Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Before I get started, if you are comfortable, please feel free to turn your cameras on. We will be keeping everyone muted so that this flows more smoothly, but please feel free to turn your cameras on. So first and foremost, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it, and we're excited to see how this night turns out. Our special guest today, Irma Herrera, is an incredible playwright, performer, and activist, and she will be sharing snippets of her performance today with us. I am also accompanied by some amazing panelists. If you guys want to introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Anisha Patel. I'm a senior at San Ramon Valley High School. I'm co-chair of my school's PTSA Inclusion and Diversity Committee, and I'm also co-president of my school's Student Equity Club.
Hi, my name is Deethi Kumar. I'm a junior at California High School. I am the leadership PTAC liaison, and I am president of a club called Save Promise that really focuses on student equity and well-being.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Ramos. I am a junior at California High School. I'm currently the president of Latinx and a member of the Cal High Equity Task Force.
And finally, I'm Amrita, and I am a senior at Doherty Valley High School, and I am a co-chair for the VHS IDC committee. So first and foremost on our agenda today, we will be sharing a quick video or a highlight reel of Irma's performances. Then Irma will take some time to converse and share her knowledge with you, the audience. And then we'll start to converse with the panelists. And finally, we're excited to see you guys, our audience, to really engage with Irma today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send it in the chat, but we would really appreciate it if you could begin your questions with the word question as you type it out into the chat so that we can identify it and quickly respond to it. So with that said, we can get into the video.
Maria, that's my Starbucks name. Easy to understand and rolls off the tongue beautifully. And as I am of the Hispanic persuasion, the name fits me. How about you? Can you tell us your name? Me, teacher? My name is Irma Herrera. Rosa says, why did you say your name like that, tonta? So that the Anglo people can understand? That's how they say my name at the doctor and dentist office. And that was the last time I mispronounced my own name. I'm having coffee with Jeffrey. And that day, the professor had grilled me about business expenses and deductions. Great job in class, Irma. Has anyone ever told you you're a credit to your people? Jeffrey, has anyone ever told you that you are a debit to yours? When I introduce myself as Irma Herrera, I am asked, oh, where are you from? No, I mean, like, where were you born? Well, the answer to all of this for me is Texas. Manifest destiny. The core believed that white settlers were destined to populate and control the North American continent from sea to shining sea. But you do notice an impediment, don't you? Who is safe in a nation with a Muslim ban? Who is safe in a nation where we need a massive social movement to tell us that Black lives matter? Who is safe when gay, lesbian, and transgendered folks are stripped of their basic humanity? I don't feel safe. Do you? Thank you so much for inviting me to join you this evening. And how exciting to see 4 young women leaders that I'll be engaging in conversation with. As I saw the video clip, I reminded how exciting and magical live theater is. The mood can change with lighting, images and sounds appear out of nowhere, but really, there's somebody out there in the tech booth. Here at my home, it's just me and my iPhone, my trusted tech assistant. So when you see me looking at my phone or at a monitor, which you can't see, it's because this is part of the show. I am not checking my email. Before we start, I would like to ask that we take a moment of silence to reflect on the difficult state our country is in, the tragedy of 2 mass shootings all within 1 week, devastating so many families and so many communities. So I would ask that we bow our heads just for a moment. You already know my Starbucks name, Maria. Easily said and a name recognized by practically everyone. And let's face it, 50-50 odds that any random Latina you meet is named Maria. When people see the spelling of my name, many think Irma, and that is one pronunciation of this name. But the name my parents gave me is Irma. Now, I am certain that many of you out there have had this experience. You introduce yourself to someone and you're met by a blank stare. A polite person might say, I didn't catch that. Can you please repeat your name for me? But we also meet people who say, oh, that's really hard. I don't think I could say your name. Can I call you something else? Do you have a nickname? I've taken to telling people that, oh, and that's often followed with the where are you from question. I've taken to telling people that I'm from Denmark because several years ago, I was in Copenhagen and I learned that the oldest and largest grocery store is named Irma and pronounced very much like my name. Inside my namesake store, my name is on every kind of product, from mustard to chocolates and mints. And as I stood there in the store, I wondered if people back home thought that I was of Danish rather than Mexican ancestry. Would they make a greater effort to say my name correctly? The name Irma isn't difficult. I'm going to teach you how to say it. A 10-second lesson. I have plenty of professional experience. I put myself through law school as a teaching assistant at the Department of Modern Languages, University of Notre Dame. Lesson 1. First, you need to smile. And holding that smile, say E. Now, Irma, you are smarter than my Notre Dame students. Now, we all meet people with names we've never seen or heard before. It is always okay to ask people to help you get their names right. And if you have a suggestion for how someone might remember the correct pronunciation of your name, please offer it. I have a friend with this name. He is sometimes called Pavan, but it's pronounced Pavan. And he tells people it's like oven with a P in front. Another friend of mine, his last name is Wang, but it's spelled W-A-N-G. I can't tell you how many people tell him he doesn't know how to say his last name. We get to decide how our names are pronounced. My spouse says to me that I should offer the following suggestion for people about how to remember my name. Just tell them to think of ear muffs. The sensitivity about names, for me, starts in South Texas with my favorite uncle, my tío Otilio. He's married to my mother's older sister. Yes, her name is Maria. The name Otilio is not difficult, but it's not that common. It is totally phonetic, 6 letters. O-T-I-L-I-O. I'm going to teach you how to say it. Lesson 2, repeat after me. Otilio. Otilio. Easy, right? A couple of times a month, Tío Otilio and Tía Maria make the 28-mile drive from their hometown to ours to pay us a Sunday afternoon visit. Tío is always so nicely dressed with a guayabera, pressed slacks, and cowboy boots. This is South Texas. A tall, good-looking man with salt and pepper hair, trim bigote, and skin the color of pecan shells. And they always show up with a box of freshly baked pastries from the Mexican panaderia. Inside, my favorites, empanadas, filled with sweet, spicy pumpkin, and marranitos. For those of you who aren't familiar with Mexican pastries, marranitos are gingerbread cookies. We bake them in the shape of pot-bellied pigs, thus the name marranito. En la cocina, my mother makes coffee for the grown-ups, and we kids get a special treat, chocolate mexicano, which my mom froths with an old wooden batidor. The visit is over when Tío Otilio stands, puts his hands in his pockets, and pulls out his nickels, dimes, and quarters and gives them to us kids. That's our spending money for candies, chips, maybe even for a movie. One day I'm with my parents and we stop at Tío Otilio and Tía Maria's house in the middle of a workday. And just as Tía's greeting us at the door, we hear the loud rumble of the big company truck that Tío drives. He had come home for lunch. While the grown-ups are talking, I notice that Tío's shirt has a patch with writing on it. I'm 6 years old and just learning to read, so I sound out the letters. T-O-M, Tom? In the car, I say to my dad, why Tío's shirt says Tom? Porque that's what they call him at work. Oh, people have different names at work? No, mijita, it's that the Americanos can't say Otilio, so they call him Tom. But why Tío doesn't teach them how to say his name? Ay, Claudio, this girl, esta muchachita, why she always asking? Too many questions. Bienvenidos. Welcome to my hometown, Alice, Texas, population 18,000. More than 70% of us are Mexican American. The rest are Anglo, white people. Our parents call them Americanos. Now, Alice isn't a suburb of some big city. It is a standalone town, 90 miles from the Mexican border. We have 2 parochial schools, St. Elizabeth's on the north side. That's for the Anglo children. And we attend St. Joseph's, 100% Mexican American. The Anglo neighborhoods north of the railroad tracks, that's where they have nice air-conditioned brick homes with green grassy lawns. In our neighborhood on the south side, the streets are paved, but we don't have sidewalks or nice parks. But these are vibrant neighborhoods full of good people. I was about 10 when Alice got its first public swimming pool, and they put it here in a park in the north side because no Anglo parent would be expected to take their children to a Mexican-American neighborhood. Although inconvenient for our families, we loved our swimming pool and we begged the grown-ups for rides. Llévanos al swimming pool, queremos ir al swimming pool. We could have stayed in the pool all day long. Niños, sálganse, se van a poner prietos con mucha arol. My mother's warning, get out of the sun or you'll turn dark as patent leather. We grew up hearing messages that it was better to have light skin. Ay, comadre Esperanza, did you see Carolina and Pepe's baby? She's so pretty, tan bonita with light skin. She looks like a gringa. They are so happy with their baby. By summer's end, I'd get really dark. And if I wore white clothes, sometimes my mother would say, muchacha, cámbiate ropa, pareces mosca en leche. She wanted me to change clothes, saying I looked like a fly in the milk. I detested that expression, mosca en leche, and I wouldn't change. And my favorite form of spite was to stay out in the hot Texas sun, getting darker and darker. Take out your catecism books. That's Sister Purificación, Sister Purification, but she lets us call her Sister Puri. Our teachers are nuns from the Philippines, brown women from a colonized nation shipped halfway around the world and hell-bent on turning us into their idea of real Americans. The sisters speak with a heavy Tagalog accent. For years, I thought that lettuce, the leafy green vegetable, was pronounced ledus. Now, I like school and I'm a good student, but catechism is so boring. I pretend that I'm taking down what Sister Puri's saying, but really, I'm making a note for Rosa. And when Sister Puri turns to face the blackboard, I give Rosa the note. Only Sister Puri is walking over here. Rosa, give me that note. Do you wish to read this note to class? No way, because I wrote in Spanish. I think Sister Puri is wearing a bra underneath her habit. Spanish, not allowed. You will be fined 1 nickel. But Sister Puri, that's not fair. The rule is that we can't speak Spanish. You never said there was a rule that we couldn't write in Espanol. No more tokpek. I couldn't wait to leave St. Joseph's. And fortunately, there was no Catholic high school in Alice. A few weeks before our 8th grade graduation, the 6 kids in my grade paid a visit to the school we'd be transferring to. It was so big. It had hallways with classrooms and hundreds of lockers, and a gymnasium and an auditorium and a library. And it was the first time that we had ever been in a classroom with an Anglo teacher and Anglo students. Listen up, everybody. We've got visitors from St. Joseph's Parochial School. They will be your classmates next year. Before we ask our visitors to introduce themselves, let's give them a big Texas howdy by waving at the Jesus and Angel. Come on, boys, behave. Come on, y'all, everybody, let's wave. I am a dark, scrawny 13-year-old, a year younger than my classmates because I skipped a grade. I am a nerdy, self-conscious pipsqueak. And the Anglo lady, the teacher, she's looking at me. How about you? Can you tell us your name? Me, teacher? My name is Irma Herrera. My classmates introduced themselves, Rosa Vega, Jorge Luna. And back in the card, Rosa says, "Why did you say your name like that, tonta?" So that the Anglo people can understand. And that was the last time I mispronounced my own name. Alice, Texas was a one radio station town. La radiodifusora KOPY. Spanish music and news from 6 a.m. to noon. The handoff song from Spanish to English radio was the playing of the Star-Spangled Banner. Howdy, this is Radio KOPY bringing you the best country music in all of South Texas. Gonna be with you from noon to midnight. Don't touch that dial. Well, that was my mother's cue to look for a Spanish radio station in the town of Corpus Christi, Texas, 40 miles away. And it was there that I first heard Dr. Hector P. Garcia. He was the co-founder of the American GI Forum, our community's version of the NAACP. And on his show, I learned that Anglo children went to far better schools than the ones we went to, and that the reason there was a poll tax was to keep poor Negroes and Mexican Americans from voting. During World War II, an estimated 500,000 Mexican Americans were either drafted or voluntarily joined the military. They shipped off to Europe and Asia to help defeat the Nazis and the evils of racism. Among them were my dad and his brothers, Tío Tilio and Dr. Garcia. After the war, Congress passed the biggest, most successful and popular affirmative action program this nation has ever known, the GI Bill. It had many wonderful benefits. It had low interest home loans, which led to massive construction booms all over the country, and so many young families were able to become first-time homeowners. But these developments were in whites-only neighborhood. It was legal to deny Black and brown people the right to live or buy a home there. Money for college was another great benefit, but the vast majority of Black and brown people of that generation hadn't even finished high school. There was legal segregation, and the schools that they were assigned to were vastly inferior, and many left as soon as they could work. There was no college in their future. The GI Bill also provided funding to build hospitals and clinics all over the United States to serve the returning veterans. But not one facility was built in South Texas with its huge population of GIs. When my father needed hospitalization for war-related health issues, a friend had to drive him 200 miles north to a brand new facility in a rural community in the Texas Hill Country, a community that was 90% Anglo. Well, you get the picture. And so did Dr. Garcia. He saw that many of the benefits of the GI Bill were not reaching his community. But what really catalyzed Mexican American veterans and the GI Forum was known as the Longoria Incident. Felix Longoria was born and raised in the town of Three Rivers, Texas, 50 miles from where my parents lived. I hadn't yet been born. Felix was married, the father of a 4-year-old girl, and he was killed in a battle in the Philippines in the final days of World War II. It took the United States government 3 years to return Felix's remains to his family, and they shipped his casket to a funeral home in Three Rivers. The Anglo-owned business would not allow the Longorias to hold services there because it was reserved only for the use of white patrons. The disrespect of an American soldier killed in service to his community was more than we were willing to bear. And this fueled the Mexican-American civil rights activism. The GI Forum got into the national news. This incident was covered worldwide. Lyndon Baines Johnson, who later became president of the United States, had just been elected to the United States Senate from the state of Texas, and he arranged for Felix to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. In high school, Anglo and Mexican American kids, we were like oil and water. Outside of school, we didn't mix. We lived in parallel universes. They had their cotillions and parties at the country club, and they did go surfing in Padre Island. We had bautismos and quinceañeras, activities with the CYO, the Catholic Youth Organization, and we loved the occasional weekend dances when some popular group or another came to play at the Knights of Columbus Hall. One day, I'm with my mother, and we go to Anthony's department store on Main Street. We were buying fabric for my Easter dress. My mother was a fine seamstress. I loved looking at the Simplicity and Butterick pattern books. Mami, está bonito, ¿verdad? When my mother goes to the counter to speak with the Anglo sales clerk, I notice these two girls mocking my mother's English. Lady, got material like this? Those Mexicans are so stupid. How much Spanish do you know? At least my mother can communicate in English. Pinches gringuitas. I couldn't wait to leave Alice, and I had the perfect getaway plan. I was going to go to college in San Antonio, but leaving home, not that easy.
Thank you so much. That was incredible. At this time, I think we're going to open it up to the panelists. So.
One of the first things I'd like to say is the thing you said about the name. It has taken me, because my name is Diti, which is very, very difficult for just like people to be able to pronounce. And I think it has taken me up until this summer when like I started seeing all this stuff on like social media and all these people suddenly talking to be like, oh, hey, you know, maybe they should pronounce my name right. Cause it's just like, it just never occurred to me that it was a problem before. I was just like, I mean, like, I know who they're talking to. And so I feel like this just is one of those things that's just like that basic like recognition of like, I deserve to have my name said properly. So that kind of hit.
I think
Well, just
Feel that.
last week. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, my freshman year, I had 2 teachers that couldn't say my name at all. They tried like once and then was like, no, it's okay. I'll just call you by your last name. And so they just called me by my last name for the entire year. And I tried to like get them to call me by my first name because I honestly don't think my name is that hard. But yeah. And then after that, I was like, that's so weird. Like you should be able to call. And I was the only one in class that they called by their last name. So I thought that was really strange. And when you said that, I was like, yes, like I feel that. Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say was that last week with the murders in Atlanta and 6 of the victims being Asian women, the Asian American Journalist Association put out a guide to the pronunciation of their names because they said it's not right. Even in death, they don't get their names right. And it wasn't just the pronunciation. It was the convention of Korean names. There being 2 names, that was their name. It wasn't like it was a middle name. That is their name. Now, of course, many of us, we're not familiar with names and how they work in other cultures and other countries. So, of course, sometimes we'll get it wrong. But once somebody corrects you, you should make the effort to learn it and to ask for help if you're having a challenging time with it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to names, it's very, for me, I call myself out and acknowledge that I don't get names right and I would be that person. I believe I've done this before, asked for a nickname instead, and you know, I just don't feel right about it. Like it's not respectful. And I just put that out there because it's okay to admit you're wrong. You know, I was like, should I even admit I did this? But no, I did this before. Deity, I don't know if I've done this to you before. If I did, I'm sorry. I call myself out, I'm sorry. But for me, when I pronounce names, it's funny because, well, not funny, but something I do is that I kind of use my Hispanic accent to kind of like get through the names because when I speak in Spanish, I have a different accent than I do in English. And sometimes when it comes to certain names, I'll end up pronouncing them wrong. Like I was with someone on the phone before and we were talking about their kid, right? And I said the kid's name, but I forgot the T because when I speak in Spanish, sometimes I don't pronounce a T. And it was just like, I was like, I'm sorry. Like after I asked the person, I was like, I'm sorry. Can you tell me how to say your kid's name? I'm sorry if I got it wrong. Like it's just, it's better to just be able to ask that person, like, how do you pronounce your name? Like, I want to learn. I'm sorry if like I can't pronounce it right. Like it's just, even if it's embarrassing, it's still respectful. So I'm sorry for my long, like 2 million minute speech, but you know.
I think something that I found, oh,
Go ahead, Amrita.
I think something that I found really interesting with name is sort of like how I've had to like struggle with it, like in learning from my parents. So I feel like my parents and generally older generations of immigrants, they came here in the 90s to the South. And because of that, they came to the US in a time where you really had to assimilate. It wasn't like California where like there was a large population of Indian Americans. It was like pretty much just like white Americans who lived there. And because of that, I feel like when I was younger, I like didn't learn to pronounce my name correctly. And still when I introduce myself to others to this day, I mispronounce it and I even struggle pronouncing my own name. So I think that's like something that I've learned generationally from my parents. And I really have to make an effort to unlearn myself and correct the mistakes that I've sort of absorbed just because my parents like learned that from their need to sort of survive in this new country. So I think that's something that's really interesting to sort of note and internalize.
When people post on LinkedIn that they no longer wish to be called X, that their real name is Y, it generates hundreds of comments. And I have a friend named Catherine who for many years was called Kathy, but at some point she decided she didn't want to be a Kathy anymore. She was Catherine, and people make the adjustment. And a lot of folks have come to a place in their lives where it's like, you know what? I don't want to be accommodating to everyone else. Why should I mispronounce my own name? That's why I named my play, Why Would I Mispronounce My Own Name? I can't make someone say my name correctly. It's outside of my power. But why would I mispronounce my own name?
I think there's such a beauty in names. And this is actually really, for me, I have a nickname in my household, and I'm only called my full name, Evelyn, if I'm in trouble. So I know the difference between the two. But my nickname is Eva. It's like you're saying, and va. So when I went to another city to practice to be a dama and a quinceañera for my cousin, her friends, they'd hear her call me Eva. We're the same age. They hear her call me Eva, and they were like Ava. So then I have a lot of people saying like, "Oh, Ava," and I'm like, Ava, and my cousin was like, Ava, like it was just confusing. Like I was okay with it. I was like, all right. But my cousin was like, Ava, like she was confused. Like she was just, if she doesn't like, I respect her for this. If she doesn't like something, she'll say it. She'll say it if she doesn't like something. But it's just in where I used to live in Hayward. A lot of my sister's friends, she's a year older than me, they'd call me Eva. When I moved out here, people will call me by my name, like my full name, Evelyn. And then in Modesto, some of the people I know call me Ava. So I mean, it's a whole mix. Has anybody else heard that? Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No. Here, you could go.
Well, what I wanted to say was that although my play is about names, nominally, it's about so much more. For example, pronouns. This is an issue for people who may not feel they're in the gender binary, or trans folks who used to be identified as female but now identify as male. And there's some people who get a new name and there's resistance. I have a friend whose grandchild decided that they wanted to be called they, not she. And my friend, the child's grandmother, see, here I am also stumbling with finding the right language, but so much of it is intent. The grandmother said to me, well, I'm not going to call her they. It's grammatically incorrect. And I said, I want to convince you otherwise. If it's important to your grandchild, and that's how they see themselves and how they wish you to see them, then you should make an effort to be respectful. And it really is about making an effort. That doesn't mean you won't make mistakes, that you won't revert to using he or she or their name if it was different, because you've known them for all these years by a different name. So we're all struggling with figuring out, how do we, at the most basic level, show respect for other people? That's what it's all about.
One of the things that I really resonated with me when you talked about your mother and your grandmother, and of course when you are an immigrant child, you do have those cultural barriers, and so many things you talked about with the fly in the milk, that is such a big thing in my family that I've argued with so many times, because in Indian culture we have fair and lovely, they're like, put turmeric on your face. Turmeric is actually very good for your face, but like that's that's not the point. But it's just that thing about like lightening your skin, and there's also like many other things like periods. Like in my culture, like Amrita and shit, like periods are very like taboo topic, and so there's just like those. And then also like my sister, she's recently started dating, so there's been all sorts of like cultural rips with that. So just like how do you like with your grandmother, with your mother, how do you kind of like navigate those like cultural barriers, those like rifts?
Well, here's the deal for immigrant families. The generation that leaves has done something so radical and dramatic. You know, they've left their home country and they want to keep part of it alive because that's home, that's their identity. But then their kids, they're American, fully Americanized, growing up here and have adapted to the culture that they're living in. So there's always that struggle between, you know, immigrant parents and children, and we all just sort of work our way. What's unique for a lot of people like myself is that we were born and raised, as were my parents, in the United States. We're perceived, so many Latinos, especially Mexican Americans, are perceived as immigrants, even if we've been here longer than white people, right? And for many Chicanos, Latinos, we are a mix of the Spanish and the indigenous that go back hundreds of years, because the Spanish came as colonizers. I talk about that in my play, so it's not like rah, rah. The Spanish came as colonizers. They put in their language. There were already people who lived here. You know, this was their home, Native peoples. But Native peoples and Spaniards, for many different reasons and in many different ways, interacted. And as a result, you have a lot of the Latino community. But we find ourselves treated as immigrants, even though we're not. And so for people like me, I've always felt like, why should I be treated like an immigrant? I'm not.
It was different for me because I still grew up in a household with my grandparents, parents, and my sister and myself, and it was like a multi-generational household with like 4 generations. And it's just, you know, like you guys were saying, just navigating life with so many different generations. It was interesting to see. And if I'd step out of my house, it wasn't like I was in a place that was super different from my house. You know, like one neighbor would play banda this day, and you know, we'd go to a party and hear banda there sometimes. I just guess I don't know what I'm saying right now. But I'm just saying that, you know, it's just so unique growing up in like his multi-generational households. You learn a lot from each generation. You learn about what barriers one generation had and what barriers need to be broken for our generation. And it's really interesting to see. What do you think on that? Do you think you had to kind of break certain barriers between your parents and you or your grandparents and you?
Well, sure. I don't get into that. The last line of my play was leaving home wasn't that easy. I wanted to go to college and did go to college, but my parents also wanted me to stay close to home. You know, and that's something that for so many people, it's so outside of the realm of their experience. If you are a well-educated parent, which my parents were not, you want your kid to go to the best school they can get into, whether it's, you know, 200 miles away or 3,000 miles away. For people who don't have the experience of themselves having been to college, it's like, well, why do you need to go away? There's college right here. Maybe it's a community college, but if you don't have a formal education, you don't know the difference between a community college and a Stanford. How can you know if you've not had that exposure yourself? And so, yeah, we're always breaking ground. And I felt like I had to do things in order to leave that perhaps my family would have been happier if I had stayed closer to home, but I ended up leaving Texas and eventually finding my way to California. It is wonderful to live in multi-generational homes. It is also wonderful to live in multicultural communities. I didn't have a white friend till I was a junior in college. Think about that. That's how segregated we were. And my son, who went to school in Berkeley, from the youngest age, he knew people of all kinds, people from so many backgrounds. I remember one story that really sticks out for me was he was a classmate of his was coming over after school and was going to stay for dinner. And my son maybe was 10. And he says to me, "Don't cook pork tomorrow because Amr is Muslim." Wow. I don't think I ever knew someone who was Muslim until I was a grown-up. But he knew someone personally, a friend, a classmate, and he grew up in a very diverse community. That is such a gift. And yet, here in the Bay Area, we're very lucky. Yet there are a lot of people, the most segregated kids in the whole country are Latino kids, and of course, African American. Even here in Oakland and Richmond, there are kids who live in communities that have very little access to anyone who's different than themselves. So let's not deceive ourselves by thinking that just because we live in the Bay Area, it's a fair, level playing field, because it's not.
Really quick, I actually had a question about that. I feel like, so I personally, I'm very fortunate to I have two parents who are college educated. And so I have been guided and helped throughout the entire of my academic life or anything I wanted to pursue. So my question is, for you is, what was it like sort of growing up without that, and where do you wish you might have had support?
I was a very self-motivated kid who did well in school. And so even though my parents couldn't guide me, I remember even in law school, that there were students whose parents were lawyers who would say, "Oh, I talked to my dad because contracts is so hard." And he was really commiserating with me about this or that. And I'm thinking, wow. And I remember when I was studying for the California bar, which is the hardest bar exam in the whole country, I was saying to my mother, "Oh, it's so hard. Estoy muy preocupada, tanto trabajo." And my mother would say, "You've always done fine. Don't worry about it. I'm going to light a candle to the Virgen of Guadalupe and pray for you." And I think, well, that's lovely, right? But she can't relate to what I was experiencing because it's outside of the realm of what she knows. So yeah, it's wonderful when you have parents that are able to provide the guidance like you're describing. And I'm glad that many schools, and there are many programs where kids can get mentorship. We have so many talented kids in poor communities. I mean, talent is evenly distributed. What people don't have is opportunity. And we confuse, we assume that everyone gets a fair shake, but they don't. A lot of kids go to schools that are far inferior, substandard. They don't have the facilities that more affluent communities have. You all live in a fairly affluent community. You have good schools. I described, true, I went to a parochial school, but I had been at a school that didn't have a library, didn't have a gymnasium, didn't have an auditorium. Yeah, that was 50 years ago, but there's kids today who are still, of course, right now everyone's on Zoom, except a few people are back, but there are public schools right now where kids are using outdated textbooks, where the gyms are in terrible condition if they have them, where the libraries don't have adequate books. And then we're surprised when kids leave school or don't advance beyond high school, or when we have a high dropout rate. And then we make judgments about entire communities. It's like, well, you know, we've got all these programs, but Latino kids and Black kids, their parents just don't seem to care about education. It always gets back to that, blaming the family, blaming the individual. We have serious systemic problems with our educational system and within our entire system of how we support people, especially people in low income communities. I'm wondering, do people have questions that they're putting on the chat that I wasn't looking at?
I think we just got one. So it
Okay.
says, it's from Krista Glazer, and the question is, you've been an amazing public interest attorney and activist. Can you speak about your decision going to law school and then pursuing public interest law?
Absolutely. And that is in my play, but not part of what I performed tonight. I described some of my upbringing and the experience of discrimination against Mexican Americans. And as I was seeing the African American, the Black civil rights movement and the things that Dr. King was fighting for and the NAACP, I thought to myself, those are the same things that are problems in our community. You know, I want to work to make things better. And that was what inspired me to go to law school. And I had a clear sense from the get-go that I wanted to use my skills and my education to advance and be in partnership with my community. And because I speak Spanish, my very first job was representing Spanish-speaking farm workers in Washington State. And that was very rewarding. And then from there, I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I worked with the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund. But I spent 15 years as the executive director of a women's legal advocacy organization in San Francisco, Equal Rights Advocates. So I mentioned that it's Women's History Month. And in that organization, we did a lot of great work. One of the big cases we were involved with was the lawsuit against Walmart for sex discrimination. We ended up getting the largest class action ever certified, but the United States Supreme Court reversed that decision. Still, it brought about many positive changes within that corporation that gave greater opportunities to women than they had experienced before. Another case that I want to mention, which is often in the news, the topic, there was a documentary called Rape on the Night Shift. And there was also another one called Rape in the Fields. We represented a woman janitor who was undocumented, and she was raped at the Ferry Building in San Francisco late at night by her supervisor. She reported it to the company and they told her, oh, we'll investigate, hush, hush, don't get the word out. They ended up firing her. And she was afraid, she was undocumented, and a lot of times people take advantage of folks who are vulnerable. And so she ended up coming to our organization and we represented her, and we ended up taking the case to trial. I had already left by the time the case went to trial, but we got a jury verdict of almost $1 million for that woman. But equally important is it led to changes in California law about the responsibility of organizations that hire people, because it's easy to say, well, we're not responsible, we the Ferry Building, we contract out to this company and they do this and that. And so I just have been so amply rewarded by the choice of careers I made. And I highly recommend it to everybody. Some days it's discouraging, especially when you see rollbacks. We have a Supreme Court that's very conservative. We don't know if they're going to undo some of the gains that we have won, not just we, me, and my organization, but collectively civil rights lawyers for decades. But you just keep pushing. You cannot ever rest on your laurels. You just keep going because it's so important for for us as individuals, for our daughters, our sons, and the next generation. Oh, that was a long-winded answer. Any comments from the panelists about what are your thoughts? I'm interested in your thoughts about diversity and equity. What do you do when you see injustice?
Beautiful response, you know, and I mean, when it comes to equity in itself, and when it comes to diversity, you know, until you said that a lot of Latino Americanos or Latin Americans are kind of like in these areas where it's just mainly them and not really introduced to a lot of diversity, it made me like think about it real quick that yes, yes, Miss Lau, before I even go, I saw your hand up. I just wasn't sure. If you
No, that's okay. Don't worry about it. It's all right. Go ahead. Please continue.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that. I'll be quick.
No, that's
I
fine.
won't be as long-winded on this response. But when it comes to diversity and equity itself, I think it's really important. And a lot of the things I grew up with in my past, I'm still trying to like think about and, you know, see. I want to see what should have been in my past that was put in my past. It wasn't until recently that I realized that when I was little, I was put into ELD. I was put into English learning, English language development. And my sister and I were put in there. And it wasn't until it was very, I guess, often, like it was, I don't know how to say it. There was a short span of time I was in ELD until I was placed into ALD, Advanced Language Development, because they realized I knew English. I'm a bookworm. I read so many books and I loved it so much. And when they put me into ALD, it was cool. I got to read, you know, I got to be at a higher level in like book reading and I loved it because I was a bookworm. But I recently processed why they put me into ELD. I was like, well, why was I just put into ELD? And I often try to give the benefit of the doubt, like, no, they put me in, you know, maybe because I was bad, but I'm brown and my last name's Ramos. My dad's an immigrant from Guatemala. And that fact, it just hit. I guess it just made me realize like, wow, just immediately because I am the daughter of someone whose first language is Spanish, I shouldn't know English. And I actually helped teach English to a family member who didn't really understand English. A lot of people don't know about that, about, you know, Hispanics past. They just kind of assume, you know, Hispanics only know Spanish, only do this, they're dumb. You know, I've gotten a comment of being dumb before for taking an AP. And it's just, there's a lot of things that's just so many stereotypes. So when it does come to equity and it does come to diversity, sometimes the first steps in my, like, what I think is that focusing on the little things, focusing on the stereotypes, like where are the roots of that and how can we break them? Miss Lau, I did give a long-winded response. I'm sorry. What was your question or response?
Eva, thank you. I want to thank you all for putting on this presentation, first of all. I've enjoyed it very much. I am a Latina. My parents are from Guadalajara. I was born in Los Angeles, in Pico Rivera. I grew up there in Southern California. And I married a Chinese American. And this last week has been very difficult for me. Anisha, I want to say to you, I hope that tonight, or maybe after your experience with that one teacher, that you're now empowered to say to people, this is what I want to be called, and teach them how to pronounce your name. Because I think that's important. And it's not difficult to pronounce. You're right. I have, my children consider, my two sons consider themselves Chino Latinos. So they grew up, Spanish was my first language. I have actually been told by another POC, oddly enough, why don't you have an accent? You know, if Spanish was why don't you have an accent? And I thought that was a really bizarre question for me. I've never been asked that before. But it was important for me to teach my sons Spanish. So they did learn Spanish and they command it very well. I now have a granddaughter, almost 22-month-old granddaughter. She's actually has a wonderful command of 3 languages. My daughter-in-law is from Beijing. She came here when she was 7. So she's learning Mandarin, Spanish, and English. And it's important to hold on to your roots, ladies. It's important to hold on to those roots. You have the benefit of the multi-generational households, and that's important for your families to see. But there's also struggles. I was the eldest of 3 daughters. My father was, one of those strong Mexicans that, you didn't really leave your house. You didn't go out. I didn't date until I was in college. And that's when I went to Berkeley. I went to Cal. And like Irma, the experience of leaving Pico Rivera and going to Cal, it was like, well, there's other kinds of people. It was a very eye-opening experience for me. So there was a lot of growth there. You ladies have the experience here in our Tri-Valley here of being able to be around so many different cultures. So that's but I want to thank you for putting on this program. I just think it's very beneficial to listen to each other and our experiences, and to continue to support one another in our growth.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. There's a very famous law case called Lau versus School District of San Francisco about bilingual education and giving Chinese students equal access. So Evelyn, when you were mentioning about being put in English learner class, even though you were already an English speaker, that was based on an assumption that made about you that was inaccurate. But there is no question that there are children who do need English language development. And it's great if they can also get support to maintain their home language. Yeah. Why would we want to throw away somebody's home language? It is so much more valuable to speak more than one language. But somehow or other in this country, there's been this ethos that to be a real American, you only speak English. You can learn a language later on in college, but you should only speak English. You should only speak English to your children if you're immigrants. I know a lot of Latinos who don't speak Spanish because their parents thought they were doing them a favor by assimilating them as if people don't notice or treat you differently. Even if your English is perfect and flawless, they look at your name or they look at your physical appearance and they still make all kinds of assumptions and judgments about you. Yeah. So your home language, don't ever throw that away. It's so valuable.
Yeah, I mean, when I was little, I used to, as I mentioned before, I was raised in a multi-generational household that I was taught English first. I helped teach English at some point, and I forgot about it till this school year. But it's just, I guess that's something as well. Like a lot of people assume you're Hispanic, you have to know Spanish. Like that should be your first language. I was asked in Spanish class, "What's your first language?" And I knew where that question was going. I was like, English. They're like, oh,
yeah, surprise. Yeah, surprise.
Yeah.
I know that Amrita had a question or a comment she wanted to make.
Yeah, I was just gonna build off what Evelyn said. Actually, when I was younger, I grew up in a right now I'm very lucky to grow up in an environment that's a lot more diverse, but when I was younger, I definitely grew up in a predominantly white school. And because of that, I never made the effort to even try to understand my parents' native tongue, even though I have grandparents and extended family members who only know those languages and can't communicate with me in English. And I feel like because I kind of shut that out when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, it's really hard for me to develop that grasp at 17, 18 years old, because it's much harder to learn a language once you're older. And I think the level of my knowledge is just understanding basic food phrases and just terminology, but I can't hold a conversation. I can't even speak it. I can mainly just understand basic terms. And I think, while I already feel really guilty for that, I feel like something else that adds on to that is what Evelyn said about feeling not cultured enough just because you don't know your language. And I think because I don't know how to speak my parents' tongue, I can't watch any movies. I don't really listen to any music in their language. And because of that, I feel very shut off from my culture. And I feel like I'm more whitewashed, when in reality, like that's just kind of the way that I am. And it's definitely something that I want to work towards understanding, but at the moment I don't. And I think because of that, it doesn't really make me any less cultured or less Indian than someone who does know these things. I think that's just sort of the way that I was raised and the way that I've grown into it.
Yeah, and I 100% everything you said. I was like, yes, me too, because like I can understand my parents' tongue, but I can't speak it back. Like anything they say, I can understand it. But for some reason, I'm not able to say anything back. Like with my grandparents, they'll speak to me in Gujarati and I'll speak to them in English, but they understand because they're immigrants and, you know, they've lived in this country for a long time, but then they'll speak back to me like in Gujarati. So it's like we're talking in two different languages. And like when I watch, I don't know Hindi at all. Like I don't know a lick of it, maybe like a couple of words because they're in songs all the time or something, but like nothing. And so when I watch like Indian movies, I have to put on subtitles. And so constantly I'm like reading and watching, like, because I don't know anything. And I also had that insecurity of like, am I Indian or am I American? Like, I'm not Indian enough or I'm not American enough. And I'm always constantly in this limbo. And I think that it feels good to like, it's nice to hear like what Evelyn said and Amrita said and everything, that it feels good to not be alone and feel like, okay, I'm not the only one in this. Like I also am very insecure about this. And my parents tell me like, oh, you can learn like the language. And I'm like, when am I like, that's so like, how am I gonna learn the language? Like I want to speak it, but anyways, I'm just gonna go on a ramble and say the same thing again. But yeah, I just wanted to say that really hit home.
I see that two people have their hands raised, but I don't see who they are. So
Miss Garawai, I hope I pronounced your last name right. Oh, let me see. What? There we go.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so I shall just do the exercise and let you know it's Karabai. And so you can break it down in like, I care about you, and then like, oh, the exclamation O, and buy, like, let's go buy something. So it's Karabai. So it makes it so much easier.
Thank you.
Of course. But what I wanted to say is I echo what Irma was saying about language being very important. And to your point, Anisha, the feeling of not knowing your home, your parents' home language, their tongue, is difficult even as an adult, because every time I was born and grew up here in the US, but every time I go back home to the Philippines, it's the reverse judgment of, oh, you don't know Tagalog, oh, you're American. And so the immediate reaction has always been, oh, well, that's Claire, she's from America. But I still proudly go back home and I still call it home, even though I was born here, because culturally that is my home. And my parents have a home there, that's where so much family is. And I actually walk through the towns knowing that even though I can't always speak the full language, especially the dialects, because once you get into the multiple dialects that are in these countries, that in and of itself has an issue. But I try, and when I went to college, I took a Tagalog class. So Isabel, go Bears, because the Tagalog class is like up and running over there. And it is making that extra effort. So even if we don't know the language, it's to Irma's point earlier of just always making the effort with the difficult names, making the effort with the different cultures. I think that's something that's really important. And going back to someone's, I think it was you, Jyoti, who said, the struggle between the immigrant experience of our parents as well as ours of being raised here. It is a difficult thing to separate what the teenage years are, but if you can do it now and communicate now, like openly and freely. It took me a while. I think I was 35 when I really understood where my dad was coming from, like what his thought process was, what his journey was, because we never asked him. You do not ask or go against dad. And so when you don't do that and you wait, you lose so many years. So what I would say to anyone who's young or even having struggles even now as an adult is making that extra effort to talk and really openly communicate in a positive way just opens up so much. I did it with my mother-in-law on a car ride because my husband couldn't pick her up, and I was sitting there just chit-chatting with her. I was like, I'm just going to go the long way because this is a really good conversation. So that's one of the things about the cultural barriers that I can offer, because I love my relationship now with my dad. And it took a while, but when you get there, oh, it's really beautiful. So thank you for having this panel.
Yes, thank you for your response. Didi, I wanted to ask, so it's Karobai, if I may ask. Karobai. I got it, people, I got it. Okay, Didi, you could go now.
Sure. One of the things is I think that all this it's like kind of just like bring back is it's taken me so long to like find pride in my heritage, I think, because again, I went to elementary school, middle school, and like now high school in different places. And so one of the things like I've done since I was always like very big into dance. And my mom like realized that, and she's like, "Okay, we'll put you in dance classes." And I thought I was gonna go into like hip hop or ballet. That's not what she put me in. She put me into Bharatanatyam, and it's like a classical Indian dance. And I when I was younger, I loved doing it. I absolutely loved it. It was dance. It was fun. Like it was. I loved it, and I had no problem performing. And as I got older, I still loved it. Like, I still loved my class when I did it, like, with, like, other people who were, like, also learning to dance with me, but I refused to, like, perform at my schools. I refused to, like, perform, like, in front of, like, other, like, white people, so to speak. And, I actually, like, last year was the first time at, like, the San Ramon, like, community culture fair was, like, the first time actually that, like, I performed and this sounds a weird way in front of, like, white people. And part of the reason, like, that, like, I think, like, I've, like, come to, like, able to like kind of overcome that little bit of like almost like embarrassment in the worst way is that Cal High, Doherty, they have like Chalkut like dance teams. And I like saw that and I was like, oh my God, like they're representing that part in like in the school, and it became normalized for me. I feel like so often we're like celebrate the culture, and one of the things I'm always just like normalize it because like that was normal for me. Like that was a dance I loved. And one of the other things is about like the language also. So one of the things like I thank my mom now is like she stuffed it down my throat. She was like, "You're gonna learn." And so with like language also, I'm sure if I was like learning French or Italian or something or like a European language, I would have had no problem. I think it was the fact that it wasn't one of those like widely regarded like languages that like make you seem like sophisticated and sound cool, but like I think that's one of the other things, like just like recently, like I've learned to come to love that like it still is an incredible language. It's an ancient language like Sanskrit. And it's just I just one of the things I want to share is just like I feel like these conversations, this representation in school, it really does help students like come to terms with their heritage and to feel pride in it. And that's just such a free thing for students.
Absolutely. Representation matters. And so often our cultures are devalued. So of course people want to separate themselves from it and say, well, no, I don't do that Indian dance, right? I do hip hop or whatever. But I see that Renee has her hand up.
Hi, first of all, thank you. It's so nice to be in this space. Hi, Irma. It is so great. I'm one of her fans. But to PTA and the host for sponsoring this event, this is everything I dream of just what the great work we're doing in education. So I'm an educational consultant as well as a big cheerleader for women's empowerment. So with the California Department of Ed, we want to see programs and sponsorships like this for you young, amazing leaders who are stepping into their power. And what I wanted to piggyback is that there was so many things I learned in hearing all of your voices, like you, maybe
20, 30, well, more like 40 years ago, being that first Latina in the all white class, being pulled out because you're smart. I can relate to all of you in different ways. You know, am I a coconut because I didn't fit in with this class or that class, this, that, or the other? But there was three things that just really resonated that I wanted to share to you young aspiring leaders, because they are very real concerns you shared. Is like, how do I fit in? How do I ask this generation or multi-generational households? These are the very things that I was privileged to share and empower women who have their graduate degrees, multi-graduate degrees at USC, coaching them on those soft skills. I would kind of present or share, learn the who, what, why, where. Just use those 4 different opportunities of, hey, grandma, why do you think that? Those are great conversation starters when you can't. And I think I heard earlier was like, how do I, start that conversation? Well, here, there's just always an opportunity. And I echo everything Irma has said, because your heritage and your culture, hold on to it with pride, that Guatemalan pride, just everything about you, your dance, your language, your making sure that others speak your name, because we don't want you to have to go through what Irma went through, what I went through. We want you to move the needle. And there's plenty of us that want to see you soar. And as you do that, just know there is so many opportunities that we want to empower this next generation. And don't be fearless. Just be fearless. Be fearless. Speak your truth. Irma brings so much joy, and I learn something new every time I'm with her. I follow her. I've met with her, but she is just a wealth of knowledge. But to you, to the panelists and the leaders, and also the sponsors who are hosting this is everything we want to see out in California, because you know what, there are plenty of young leaders who don't have this opportunity, and we need you to keep moving that needle. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you so
Irma,
much,
keep being
Renee.
awesome.
Thank you so much, Renee.
I think one topic that I saw multiple people talk about that I just think is so interesting, and I want to hear all of your perspectives on, is the idea of being like American and what that even means. I think, like, I know for me, whether I want to admit it or not, I automatically associate being American with like white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, etc. And I don't want to think of it that way, but that's just like what you get from growing up here and like being exposed to the media, etc. And I think that's something that we're trying to correct. And I noticed a common theme when people were sharing their stories is, for example, like being darker skinned or having like a non-white name or like being bilingual are all things that make us feel less American, when in reality, like this is a country of like immigrants. Like America is, built on like stolen land that is not like what white people are from. Like technically the majority of this nation is immigrants, but I just think it's really interesting how we associate qualities with being an immigrant or being a person of color as not American, when that's kind of what this country was built on.
Yeah, one of the things as a nation we're grappling with is the fact that we've been taught a history that's not accurate. And so how do we unpack that? And there are tremendous controversies about how do we teach history, but certainly the way that it has been taught is not the full story. And I don't think we can make great progress as a nation until we reckon with the sins, our taking land, the genocide of American Indians, slavery, all of the laws that marginalized Asian people, Latinos. All of these are part of the American experience. And we have to acknowledge that. And we can move forward and we can reckon in various ways, but we can't do it by pretending that these things didn't happen, because they did.
Yeah. And I think on the topic of history, I think when it came to how my personal community of Latinoamericanos and Latinos in general, how many are discriminated. Sorry, I just started speaking Spanish for a second. But I think I never really associated it with racism because what I was taught racism like all it was. And I'm not saying this isn't it, but I remember only really learning about how Black people were mistreated in American history. And I didn't catch it till this year, until Shimon Bowie, I hope please correct me if I butcher names a lot, please correct me if I say names wrong. But yes, I agree, chattel slavery is horrible as well. We learned about it in history. But I just think when I associate racism only with um, Black people and white people, I was like, oh, so events that happen to Latin Americans, they're not credible. They're not really like up that rank, like everything that happened with ICE detention centers, everything that happened with the whole Build the Wall movement. The hatred towards our community, I never associated it as bad because it wasn't something put in the textbooks. It wasn't really something I was taught. The more that I had to learn out deep research. So I feel like when it comes to just showing the oppression of all communities, I guess that's something that can be improved. Like, just instead of only talking about the racism like towards one community, maybe acknowledging all communities. We're all in this country together, we're all in this world together, and I just, to acknowledge everyone is the first step into really starting to build momentum and make change.
And also important to acknowledge racism within communities of color also. Many years ago, I was working as a journalist and I went to Alabama when Alabama was passing, like all these states, these very repressive anti-immigrant laws. And I met with a bunch of women leaders, and some of the African-American women said, we really need the Latino community to talk with your own people about anti-Blackness. And it's true of every community. You know, we have different levels of racism towards other groups, and nobody's pure, right? I mean, some cases are far worse than others, but we have to acknowledge. And why are we this way? Because the messages we have gotten our whole lifetimes from the media show people in really demeaning light. They lead us to make assumptions about groups, you know, and you have actors who say, Black actors who say, no, I'm not going to take roles as thug, drug dealer. Latinos who say, no, I'm done with being the maid, being the housekeeper, being the gardener. We're going to make our own series so that we can have roles of regular people and we can be normalized and just have a regular family life. But the first step is recognizing in ourselves racism that we have gotten from society at large or from our families. I do these trainings with groups and I ask people, what messages did you get growing up from your community about people different from you? And that can be different racially, ethnically, socioeconomically, different gay, lesbian, transgender. Just think of all the messages you've gotten about all of these people. And some of it is really ugly stuff that has been passed on to us. And even if we reject it, and hopefully we reject it because we have experience with these people that makes us see, wow, a transgender person can be just like me, have all the same interests, disappointments, excitement. We just need to really grapple with our own prejudices against other people. It's hard work, but it's so worth it, and we all need to do it.
Sorry, this is probably the most random thing to add on to, but just this thing that's bothered me for years now. One of the things I found is that, like, again, I also, Evelyn, I love to read. I absolutely am obsessed with it. But one of the things I found is whenever there's a book that, like, will often, like, if there's a book written with like a person of color by a white author, the entire character is centered on like their ethnicity. And I think one of the things that we is like just like that idea that we're like people too, especially for like we have the same thoughts, we want the same things. It's funny honestly to read some of them, because if you do have that person of color character, it is completely utterly focused on just them being a person of color.
Yeah, it's not random. It's totally relevant to our conversation. We just want to be seen. Our stories are like everybody else's stories. So you have dramas in which the main characters are African American, for example, and people say, oh, well, that's for Black people. But we go see movies that are about white people. And then there's movies made in which the central characters are Asian people. And well, we should all be going to see those movies. And there has been what is now called crossover, but there's no such thing as crossover for white movies or white music, right? We're all supposed to appreciate it. But when it comes to communities of color, our music, our films, our books need to get off the ethnic studies shelf, not that they don't belong there too, and into just the regular alphabetical listing of literature or nonfiction or whatever it is we've written.
I think when it comes to music, this is such a different topic. I love music. I recently started hearing K-pop again, right? I've always been into lots of themes of music, but I just think it's so like, music is awesome. Like, it's just this certain way. When it comes to my faith, personally, I'm a Christian. Music is a way of worship. And when it comes to dancing, I salsa music, my thing. But I just think music has such a way of connecting. Like so many, like you have reggaeton getting into the American influence, like on the new SpongeBob movie, J Balvin and Daini, I think that's how the artist's name is pronounced. They made a song, and I remember my dad playing it, and it's just so cool to see like music fluctuating and kind of just going in and out of American like culture. And now Just Dance, before Just Dance would really only put American songs, but I believe now they put songs of different cultures, and I'm like, this is so new, but this is amazing. Like, I think music has a way of connecting us all. Do you guys think the same on this? You know, like just the way music connects? Yeah.
Now, I'm mindful that it's a little after 8, and I'm happy to stay and have a conversation with whoever wishes to remain, but I also want to be respectful of people's time. So I'm not in charge, but I'm just pointing that out. Everyone says, soy muy mandona. I'm very bossy. So I'm not trying to boss you around. I'm just making you aware.
Yeah, if you like, to the audience, if you need to leave, feel free to leave. I know we're over time, but if you want to hear more and if you have more questions for us, we can stay on for a few extra minutes if you want to share or have any questions for Irma.
And thank you all so much for being here. It was a real pleasure to be invited to be a presenter for your series. I very much appreciate your presence.
I think a final question that I have personally is, I know you talked about your legal experience and how that was sort of a way of sort of tackling these larger like social issues, but something else that I'm really interested in is how you have used art and sort of storytelling as a way to talk about social issues and how that is important as well. So
yeah, so I left law thinking I was just going to take a break for a year or so, but then I got involved with writing and I got back into journalism, something I had done for several years. I've been in and out of law 3 times, but I never went back to law, and I discovered that I really loved writing. And I ended up taking a class about storytelling and wrote a play and got it on stage. But it's all the same issues and themes that are about social justice. So I view my work very much in line with what I've done as a lawyer. And people say, well, how do you transition from being a lawyer to being a storyteller playwright? And I say, this is what lawyers do. We tell stories. We tell stories about our clients, whether we are public defenders and we want to give our client's version of what happened, or a prosecutor who is prosecuting a crime, or even a corporation who's trying to merge with another corporation. You are telling the story to whoever will make a decision about how this is going to proceed. So they're very similar skill sets, and it's the same with journalism. So I think whatever passion people have, you can find ways of doing it and feeling fulfillment in more than just one career. So that's my long-winded answer to that.
thank you. Do we have any final questions or comments that anyone wants to share?
I know we're due time. I had one that this is a very broad question. I think so as like a leadership student and as like president of like my club, one of the things one of the things that we just noticed in our school is like the students who need help are often the ones who don't necessarily reach out for help. And that is just something like so one of the things like our club is really big is like battling like social isolation, because like that affects like mental health, that affects their ability to like perform in class, that often can come from like just like family situation. But so my question is how do you think we reach out to students who require help? How do we like create those safe spaces for students? Just like what are your thoughts on that? If like as it's like just honestly just like a really like free like what do you think we can do to reach out to students who maybe go through some of the issues?
Yeah, I think connecting with students personally, just showing that you're interested in them. And, you know, sometimes people are embarrassed if they're having a hard time. They don't want to be perceived as struggling. And so, but if you just take interest in people, and it doesn't have to be like, do you need help with something? Can I help you? But just reaching out and showing your humanity and having a conversation. But I do know what you're talking about, that oftentimes the people who are always looking for help are already the people who are achievers and doing quite well, but they want to do even better. And that the students who are struggling, especially academically, are reluctant to ask for help. Well, thank you all so very much for inviting me to join you this evening. It was a very interesting conversation. There is so much more we could talk about. But at the end of the day, what all of my work is about is showing respect and treating people fairly. And there are many ways that people are treated unfairly that we don't even see, because the system is rigged so that they have to work so much harder to get to where many people just are by virtue of their family circumstances. Okay, well, thank you all so much. And I
Irma,
will bid
thank you
all
so much. That was so much more than I think. I mean, expected amazing, and it was amazing, and it went above and beyond amazing. And so it was beautiful. Thank you. I know we had a lot of comments in the chats appreciating your honesty and our students' bravery, the whole thing. So beautiful, beautiful job, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.